You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your host, Dimitri Vitsa. I'm also the founder and CEO of Rock, Paper, Scissors, the PR and marketing firm that specializes in music tech and innovation. On today's episode, we talk with Bomo Piri, Chief Brand Officer at Native Instruments. Our conversation begins with the techno Berlin roots of the brand and dives into what's happening today with their strategic partnerships, like the London-based Young Urban Artist Foundation and a very cool sounding recent collab with Mustard at Coachella. We chat about Bomo's unique marketing approach, as well as the importance of authentic community engagement and how they see that as a through line to most of their marketing efforts. But first, the news.
Rock, paper, scanner.
All right, we're here with our Rock, Paper, Scanner news roundup. This is Dimitri, and here with me is Jade Preboy, who you've heard on the other news roundups with Trisha. Jade, you and I haven't had a chance to do a news roundup yet. I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah, likewise. Dimitri, thanks for inviting me to be here, and I'm excited to dive into the news roundup with you.
This will be fun. All right, I have one that I want to kick off with, and then I'd love to see what you've been scanning. This one comes from Music Business Worldwide. Daniel Tenser last week did an article called U.S. Music Publishing Revenue Jumped 13.4% to $7 billion in 2024, outpacing the growth rate of recorded music. And Jade, the reason I thought this one was interesting is because it's really a big win for publishing, for the publishing side, with such a big jump, and the fact that it outpaced the recorded music side, which only grew, it says, 2.7%. That's the 10th straight year of double-digit growth for publishing, and a sign of how the industry's power balance is shifting. So just when you think about the power of record labels, the power of publishers, there's this kind of shifting thing that's happening there. Obviously, the recorded side is still driving a lot of revenue, but there's some strength here. All these campaigns and efforts by David Israelite and NMPA around let's get more revenue for the publishing side, advocacy on that side is really interesting. So, I mean, what's interesting here is 10 years ago, recorded music was 220% bigger than publishing, and now it's just 60% larger. So publishers are probably excited about that, obviously. And other takeaways, a major driver of growth was collecting unpaid royalties. Nearly $2 billion came from companies that previously claimed they didn't need to pay for songs. So they're like picking up pennies and dollars and billions of dollars now of money that was just missing from the whole scene. There is mention of that audiobook bundling fiasco, which they say potentially cost $3.1 billion by 2032. But really, this is about publishers pushing back, lobbying for the right to negotiate directly with streaming services instead of being locked into government set rates. And Jade, the broader message is just while publishing's growing, much of its revenues still regulated, and the industry is now uniting to fight for more songwriter value in kind of a more free market, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, I think the uptick in tech solutions for collecting royalties, I think, is huge. We've worked with a ton of companies in this space that have major innovations in that space.
Great point.
There's some interesting use cases around like live performance, companies that were using music when they didn't know they had to pay for licenses. The space as an industry is getting more educated on what needs to be licensed. And the tech around the collections and royalty collections is super interesting.
I love that point, Jade.
We're
talking about kind of the advocacy, the unification of the industry, but you're talking about there's these tools that are emerging that are helping optimize that by finding that revenue, by making claims, like checking on attribution, all that kind of stuff. That's a really good point about the use of technology for good.
Yeah. And it's getting better and better, and the ability to cross-reference databases and find unclaimed royalties is reaching a point where it's really advanced now. And we've worked with a few companies in this space, and so we're tapped into that stuff. Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
What about you, Jade? What are some of the headlines that you scanned from the past week or so?
Yeah, one that I thought was really interesting is Music Ally UMG JV with investment firm WTSL focuses on artist-led IP. This ties into the last article we were talking about, but Universal Music Group's plan is to unlock opportunities that extend music's value across film, television, fashion, consumer products, branded experience, and other emerging growth areas. I assume gaming is part of that. And this buzzword that they say in the article, artist-led IP, where they're trying to do the same kind of brand expansion for music that's been done for sports, film, and digital media. And so that's a theme we've been touching on here at RPS, is like the convergence of media, most specifically music and sports and gaming, and how all these platforms are converging in a sense. And I think that it's due time for labels and artists to view themselves like athletes. They should have the same sponsorship opportunities, brand opportunities. Almost every major athlete has some kind of sponsorship, but it's not the same for music. I think that's a huge growth area for artists, independent artists, especially like the new generation of TikTok artists and people that have launched their careers on social media. I think it's a huge opportunity for them, and it's really exciting.
It's interesting. I read that piece when you pointed it out, and I noticed they didn't use the phrase name, image, and likeness, NIL rights, which is huge around that sponsorship stuff in sports. And I just thought it was kind of interesting. Like, are they tiptoeing around that for some reason? I mean, it's basically the same thing they're saying here. This idea that the name, image, and likeness of a musician could be used to monetize in further ways. The question is, what's Universal Music Group's relationship with that? Like, that's been the battle in sports, is does the athlete get to claim and collect on that, or is it the franchise that they have a deal with that claims and collects on that or gets a certain percentage? As the maturation of digital music has evolved to be so mature, there's this question of like, well, how else do we monetize the personalities, the brands of individual artists? And then who gets to collect? Who's actually going out and doing those deals? And then who makes the money? Is it the artist, the manager, and even the record label? This is an interesting question, but it is cool to see that there's a potential revenue expansion for the entire music industry around this.
Yeah. I mean, there's this conversation, I could go on forever about it, but I always thought it was interesting that like Monster energy drinks, for example, is marketed towards extreme sports and adrenaline junkies, like people who ride dirt bikes or that kind of thing. And I always wondered, why isn't there a drink, like a sports drink for musicians? And one of the first examples of this kind of thing that I really loved was in this video game called NBA Street Volume 2. You could actually play as Nelly and the St. Lunatics as one of your teams. And I thought that was so cool. I was a huge fan of Nelly when I was a kid. And so those kind of gaming integrations, and we're seeing this stuff in Fortnite as well, where you can play as artists, but it's not widespread yet. I think it's still the early stages of it.
I think we also caught in the scanner a week or so ago that Coca-Cola is launching a very artist-focused record label as well. So speaking of drinks and sports, drinks and music, I can't wait to see if that turns into something where they can really support creativity and interesting eclectic music and things like that as a part of a brand deal.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Speaking of gaming, you pulled out another article from The Verge. PlayStation's concert series is coming to the US. What's that about?
Yeah. I thought that was super interesting. I think that you want to capture, in general, with marketing, you want to capture people where they are. You want to find the watering holes that people are already using or coming to, and where they're living and hanging out. And so game consoles is a huge opportunity, I think. And so to bring a concert series into the PlayStation world is super interesting. I mean, it says right here in the subheadline, here live renditions of music from games like God of War and The Last of Us.
Wild. Go to a show and see the live renditions.
Yeah. And especially that it is video game music. That's also like a huge part. I mean, music is a huge part of what sucks people into games, the music in Zelda and all that. When I was in high school, one of the marching bands played the Halo theme as their competition song. And I thought that was super interesting. So like video game music has a special place in gamers' hearts. And so I think there's a reason why they're going that route, not just bringing Beyonce to PlayStation. Let's create live renditions of the games that people are already playing a lot. And so, yeah, to me, it's fascinating. I mean, I'd be excited to attend some of those.
Yeah, a great way to bring people together in a world where we're like, oh, everyone's locked in their consoles, on their screens. They're so antisocial. No, not necessarily, right? Like, let's take the things that are relevant to people in culture and put them into a performance venue. How cool is that? I think it would be fun to just see that happen. And your story reminded me of a coworker who, when we'd be like thinking about something, brainstorming, or they'd be waiting for an answer from me, they go, do. I'm like, oh, I know exactly what song that is.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I've got one more to round us out here, which was an article that Kristen Robinson had in Billboard. Sony Music CEO talks AI. We are going to do deals for new music AI products this year. Rob Stringer says the major has engaged with more than 800 companies or ethical product creation, content protection and detection, enhancing metadata, and more. And it talks a little bit about the lawsuits that the majors have against Suno and Udio, but then also the negotiations that they're doing around licensing, the labels are doing around licensing with those two generative AI companies, which, that's not totally uncommon. Like, we're going to sue you. No, we're going to negotiate. Like, there's a power dynamic there. But I was expecting like him to say, oh yeah, we're doing tons of deals here. And then it kicks off by saying, we think there's some cool ethical AI companies that are doing things like content protection and detection. That's not the same thing as licensing with generative AI companies. But so I'm like looking for like, where's the interesting example of like that explains what is this dichotomy between suing and negotiating? Do they want to sue them out of existence? Do they want to get a large piece of equity like they did with Spotify? Or do they think the cat's out of the bag and they have no choice but to negotiate licenses in a time where there's a government that seems more partial to fair use argument than to copyright protection? What is it? And I guess my takeaway after looking at the article is it's probably all of the above. But I think the biggest insight is they want to show the government that the labels are negotiating in the spirit of a free market, right? If basically the labels aren't coming to the table, there might be a little bit of that sense of like, well, this is fair use. This is culture. This is stuff that's out there. It's not like we're copying it exactly. Everything's a little different. But I guess the quote that got me from Stringer to really understand this, so he said, with deals being carried out, it will be clear to governments that a functioning marketplace does exist. So there was no need for them to listen to the lobbying from the tech companies so heavily. So that to me was like that was the catch point. Say, okay, I got it. You're trying to show, yeah, sure. It's all of those things that I mentioned, but specifically you're trying to show, no, we're willing to negotiate. We just have to like come to the table with something that's reasonable. And so it's like walking this fine line between not just suing them out of existence when they've got a lot of support from the government and from society, but also not just giving away the farm, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Yeah, no, super interesting. I think I agree with you that it is going to be a little bit of all of the above. And it's going to probably be fragmented in a sense to where, how the music industry is now. There's not going to be, I don't know if there's going to be one name and likeness solution. It might be platform by platform. And then what you can do with that music outside of the platform is probably going to be put into buckets as well. So yeah, we're going to know soon, but it might be later than sooner that we have some clarity on all this.
Yeah. No, it's going to take time to work out, I think, on the legal front for sure, and with the negotiations. But there's also things happening all the time. It's moving very quickly, and it's one of those things like, can the law and or the negotiations keep up with the way that people are using the technology that's emerging?
I think that's where the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
I think that's the kind of the Pandora's box opening where I'm no data scientist, but I would bet on the speed of AI and the speed of users engaging with new tech to vastly outpace regulations and licenses being set in place.
I'm doing an interview next week on the podcast with Jessica Sabraj from Cosign, who specializes in helping rights holders register their copyrights. And I think make sure to tune into that one, listeners, because I think you'll find out some interesting thoughts about like, well, how do we future-proof musical IP from what Jade just said, the time that it takes to actually get legal, to actually make sure there's some kind of protections there. And then also, listeners, listen to last week's episode with Damian Reel, the technology lawyer, who puts a compelling but also slightly scary case out there that it's going to be tough to argue against fair use. So we're going to have, like last week's episode, we'll give you one scenario. Next week's episode, we'll give you another one. And Jade, I'm thinking we, Rock, Paper, Scissors, and Music Tectonics, should probably do a responsible AI summit like ASAP. Wouldn't that be awesome? Yeah. Just get everybody who's wanting to talk about this all together on a Zoom and really work some of this stuff out, talk through, get everyone's thinking. For the music industry has to move quickly to just understand, like, how could this all go down?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love that idea.
I think I'm going to do that. Let's do that within a month. Let's see if we can do that in July. Make sure you're subscribed to the musictectonics.com newsletter to find out when we get that scheduled. Jade's been helping host some of our seismic activities. We have them every month. So come and hang out with me and Jade on those events. Musictectonics.com. Get on the newsletter. Get on the seismic. Jade, this was fun. Thanks for scanning the news with me.
Thanks, Dimitri. Yep, I love doing these with you. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. All right, here we go. Off to the feature.
We're switching things up a bit at our July seismic activity.
Where worlds collide, we're bringing together sports and music. Join us on July 30th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. UK time for Stadiums to Streams, how music, sports, and tech can work together. We'll hear from experts Siraji Thomas, founder of Sampray Solutions, Jay Chalet, award-winning international DJ, MC, and producer, and Chantal Epp, founder of Click and Clear. Register for free and learn more about our monthly seismic activity events at musictectonics.com.
Now for our feature interview.
Today's guest is Bomo Piri, the Chief Brand Officer at Native Instruments. Recently named one of Marketing Week's future marketing leaders, Bomo is spearheading the brand transformation at Native Instruments, connecting global creators with expressive tools. Recent moves by the brand under Bomo's stewardship include collaborations with DJ Mustard, mastermind behind Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us, equipping his recent Coachella headline set as an homage to his bedroom studio, and many other notable collaborations in the works. Thanks for joining us, Bomo.
Thanks for having me, Dimitri.
Let's dive in. Just since we've got a broad audience, if you meet someone on an airplane and they ask you what Native Instruments is, what do you usually tell them?
Ooh. First, I ask them if they know about music production, are a producer. And if they say they are a producer, I'll ask them if they know about Native Instruments. They might say no, or I'm not quite sure what Native Instruments is. And then I'll say, do you know Tractor, Machine, Reactor? And usually their eyes light up and then they go, oh, yeah. I used to use Tractor. Like I started DJing with Tractor. And so for those who don't know, who are not music producers, who are not DJs, Native Instruments really makes up 3 brands, actually. But Native Instruments kind of started out as the most comprehensive sound creation and audio finishing ecosystem there was at the time. So it's a company that birthed out of the Berlin techno and house uprising, and since then has obviously branched out into a bunch of different genres. But if you are someone who is interested in making music, if you're someone who's curious about what sound you can make, Native Instruments is that brand. Native Instruments is really that ecosystem. It's made up of software for sound creation, and that's virtual instruments, that's smart mixing tools, and also hardware. So anything that you can take out of your brain and put into the world, Native Instruments is really that. And so it's really it's an ecosystem as well as software and hardware for music producers, engineers, mixing and mastering folks.
Got it. So what's your favorite thing about the Native Instruments brand? Like, I mean, you're a marketing guy, you're a brand guy. What gets you excited about the culture and brand of Native Instruments?
Yeah. I'd say for me, I am someone who, I love the clubs. I love the niche kind of subculture. And I think Native Instruments is that. One thing that really excites me about the brand is it's not like any other MI brand out there, which is super exciting because it's got its own history, and it's a history that is rooted in, like I said, this kind of bedrock of really subculture music. You know, when you think about the house and the techno side of things, and that is what really makes me excited about the people that I work with. I think there's the brand, which is what it is, Native Instruments as the core brand. And then there are the people who make it. And I think what excites me is when I get to talk to different artists who say, I saw what was going on in Berlin. I'm a hip hop producer, and I felt like I wanted some of that. And that's super exciting. I saw how the kids were really getting down in applying music tech to the subculture genres that they were living in, the club genres that were happening. Think about the Berghains, but also Tressers. And I really love that history. And so when I joined the company, knowing that was what made Native Instruments by name was super exciting.
When you talk about the techno and Berlin roots of Native Instruments and how, say, a hip hop producer might come in and say, I want a little bit of that, what do you think they're saying? Like, it feels like Native Instruments came up in a period where the software was able to do things that were never done before. And so there was this sort of musical aesthetic of that techno Berlin scene that infused it. But in the process, there was this innovation in technology that allowed for new types of sounds, or more like flexibility with sounds, or more access to sounds. Like you no longer needed to buy every physical piece of hardware. You no longer needed to buy every pedal or customize your whole like electronic setup because you could do it all through software. Is that sort of what we're getting at here?
Both. I think, look, I'm a marketing guy, and the one thing that I really appreciate is that there's this incredible amount of innovation, especially in the beginning. In 1996, we were still using desktop, right? And that was a time where music innovation, virtual instruments were blowing everyone's minds. And then thinking about how you could take that and create new sounds or get access to sounds and instruments you never had before or you couldn't afford, frankly. That's exciting. That was really cool. But then what I got really excited was how you take that and also start to storytell around it. So the innovation is one really amazing thing that hip hop producers definitely saw. But there was something also that you couldn't replicate, which was the vibe, for lack of a better word. That feeling of, hey, look, this is something that the founders of this company created, not with a huge amount of resources, but really a lot of trust with each other and also really deep understanding of the music that the genre, the niche wanted to hear. So that wasn't something that everybody celebrated. And to this day, almost 30 years later, it's not like everybody knows about native instruments, but the people who do know it really love it for what was protected. And when I say that, hip hop producers looked at it and said, I want some of that.
I think some of that community feel that you're describing comes out of the way the technology was built as well, in the sense that other people are building samples and virtual instruments on top of the platform that you have there. It inherently has that sort of like, what is this scene up to? What is this person up to? What is this developer up to? What is this producer up to? Because people can start to select from different scenes as a result as well. It's almost like a fractal version of what you described.
100%, 100%. And you had a lot of people within Native Instruments, our product teams, our engineers who came from these different genres or appreciated these different genres. And so when we were creating these sounds, what was really amazing is it becomes, as the company gets bigger, an amalgam of really an understanding of music and what works, what doesn't work, but also a very playful level of experimenting with sound too. So people appreciated it and continue to really sing the praises of even some of the products that don't exist anymore. There's a continued level of love for what was built.
Yeah. So I want to get into a little more specificity around some of the things you were talking about in terms of your love of the brand and your excitement around it. But first, just so people are clear, what's your role in the company? I know we said you're chief brand officer, but what does that mean to you on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis?
Yeah. So my role is, yes, I am VP of brand or chief brand officer at Native Instruments, which really means three things. So one is that my team sets the narrative that ties those three companies into one creator first story. What does that mean? So that means, look, iZotope has its own history. Native Instruments has a legacy. Plugin Alliance also has one. And so we really my team looks at how do we use a lot of field research, a lot of analysis to really build unique stories that make people ultimately feel something that relates to the stories that you as a music producer, whether you're a first-time bedroom producer or you're a Grammy award-winning artist, a story that is rooted in reality. And then secondly, we also are looking at really trying to protect the brand equity. So while we're telling the story, it's making sure that the legacy itself continues. It's making sure that we're not dipping into spaces that don't necessarily feel right for the brand. And so every touch point from social to the product interfaces, how they look, how they make you feel, do they align with the different attributes that we set up for Native Instruments, for iZotope, and for Plugin Alliance? That's the second thing. And then the last thing is really community. So we build community programs and partnerships that make the story feel real. That's where the Mustard collaboration comes in. That's where the number of collaborations that we'll talk about today all come in as well, is making partnerships that are rooted in really exciting experiences. And again, at the same time, still protect the brand equity overall and the legacy long term.
Cool. Awesome. That's great. That does help us set the framework here. And let's dig into some of that. People often talk about cultural relevance in marketing. And I'm curious, what does that mean for you and how does it play out for your work at Native Instruments?
Yeah. Cultural relevance. How do you get it? How do you
Hmm.
get it, Dimitri? I think that's a really interesting one for some brands because cultural relevance for me really starts with understanding the people that are making culture. I spent a lot of time working at other companies. I've worked at YouTube for about a decade, and one thing that was really important was understanding what we called the zeitgeist of creator. And it's the same thing at Native Instruments as well. It's, do you really understand what culture looks like today? And also, can you forecast or can you work with people who can articulate where culture is going? So it starts with audience insight, not necessarily trend chasing.
Hmm.
So audience insight is, it could be that you're working with another organization to do qual and quant analysis like a media, but it could also be that you just talk to people, right? You could just go to Coco down the street and have a discussion with people who are coming out of the bathroom. I know it sounds really invasive and crazy, but that's the type of attitude that I recommend, I encourage my team to have. Is everyone who's a musician has a really unique story. And so if you want to understand what cultural relevance means, you need to understand both at a personal level as well as a macro level. We all have it everywhere because most of the people who work at Native Instruments also make music, which is the brilliant thing. So you're in music spaces. So you start with the audience insight. Don't rely on just the trends. Those things
Yeah,
are.
Bomo, I like what you're saying. It actually kind of reminds me of a traditional A&R person from a record label in a sense. Like you have to be out in the clubs, literally seeing the sweat on people's foreheads to
You need
understand like
to.
what is not what's trending, but what's about to happen. What's the well of creativity before it even emerges in a public, like fan-facing sphere.
100%. Look, if you don't know, if my job was, if I had to explain my job outside of the kind of, here's what Native Instruments does, if no one knew what the company was, they just wanted to know what I did. It's really understanding what people want to feel. As a brand person, that's just second nature to the job, right? You have to really talk to people in order to get that. And so for harnessing that cultural relevance, if you will, it means having conversations. And I don't think that any brand, any company necessarily does it perfectly every time. You still have P&L reports and you still have a lot of business objectives that you have to hit. But at the same time, if you are a custodian of the brand, it's important that you understand what that looks like. And then you think about how you translate that into different opportunities, collaborations. So, Mustard, for example, that was purposefully centered on his production workflow. It wasn't just swapping or putting his logo onto something. It was really an artist who was having a moment, but also an artist who wanted to really work with and wanted his community to understand that he is a producer first. So he was, if you saw the Coachella set, he was really paying it forward, recognizing all of the producers who got him to where he was, and Native Instruments being part of that conversation was authentic as we can get it, because he was having a moment. He was talking about the tools that got him there, and Machina being one of those groove boxes that was centered around beat making, and he wanted to talk about it, was
So,
that relevance for us.
so what did that look like at Coachella? How did that manifest?
Yeah. How did it manifest in terms of on the stage,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
how
yeah.
it
What
got?
did people see?
So you saw him open up his set. It was really like, it was beautiful storytelling. It was him starting in the bedroom, right? It was him with his machina and his keyboard, his 88, and he's not talking, but he was playing all those songs that you didn't know had Mustard on the beat, but
Mm.
they were cultural moments, cultural iconic songs for us, for in the hip hop space. And it started there, and then it blew up, right? It kind of took you to a bigger place, which is obviously Super Bowl and all of the big moments that he's having right now. And so it was almost this kind of the story that we tell at Native Instruments, which is any bedroom producer starting out has the opportunity to come out with really clean, precise sound, professional grade sound. And then you move into all those avenues that you work with your labels and your team on. And so that was the story that he told.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. I want to ask you about strategic partnerships. Did you want to say anything else about cultural relevance before we move on?
I think I'd say it's earned. If we're going to talk about cultural relevance, I won't go out of my way to say that Native Instruments is nailing cultural relevance. I think we have to earn it through repeated action with our community. So we're not looking to do one-off stunts. We're looking to do real authentic collaborations that feel natural to Isotope community, the Plugin Alliance community. And that's how we earn cultural relevance as a brand, as brands.
Awesome. So I guess you could think of those as strategic partnerships. I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about what role those play in marketing a company like Native Instruments. If you want to get into more examples, glad to hear that as well. But tell us a little bit about the role of those partnerships.
Yeah. We've done a lot of partnerships over the last 18 months. We've been really focused on partnerships that aren't just about going for the biggest artist or the shiniest thing. It's really collaborations that show our tools in a real studio pressure cooker. So for everyone who is a producer, for everyone who has been in that space, there's a lot of pressure. There's deadlines, of course, but there's also a sound that you have, that signature. And then there's the artist sound. And trying to bring those two together isn't always the easiest thing. And so we wanted to find partnerships that give voice to some of those pressures that producers experience. I can give you examples, but one of the partnerships that I'm really proud of is how we have started to look at both ends of the spectrum. One side of it about education for the kind of new to music creators, and then what we do for the professional grade as well. And so for those new to music creators, we looked at working with Young Urban Arts Foundation. That's an example of some partnership that's about being versatile. These aren't partnerships that are rooted in huge amounts of money, but they are partnerships that are definitely rooted in trust, in authenticity, and a lot of support. And so, the likes of working with In Music and Akai Professional, the upcoming partnerships that we're engaging with under the Native Control Standard are examples of what we're doing to open up Native Instruments to more surfaces, more opportunities, more types of creators. Not everybody wants to use just Native Instruments stuff, hardware specifically.
Yeah.
And so being able to get your different instruments, your contact instruments specifically on an Akai, that's on an MPC, that's freaking cool.
Yeah.
And it's one of those examples of a partnership that it takes a lot of work. It speaks to all types of creators, but it does so much more for the industry overall.
Got it. So Native Control Standard is like a technical standard that Native Instruments has to help other hardware devices play Native Instruments based virtual instruments and plugins more seamlessly so they can.
Thanks.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
You said it best.
Okay, cool. And what was the foundation you mentioned the strategic partnership with?
That's YUAF. So that's Young Urban Arts Foundation.
And what do they do?
They're based in London. They're focusing on education for young folks who live in urban areas who maybe don't have access to plugins, who maybe can't afford some of the software or the hardware that we come out with. And so it's one, making education accessible, so music production education. And it's two, then giving access to some of these tools that they can use to get started. Because like I said earlier, there's a lot of stuff that lives in our heads, right? I wouldn't go as far to say anybody can be a musician or anyone can be a producer. There's a technicality to it. But if you had the language and if somebody was willing to break it down and not be so esoteric about what you're doing, how music production works, or what a workflow could look like, there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of people. And some folks who maybe live in certain areas within urban communities may not have that access. So if we wanted to go back to our mission, which is really making sure that every creator can express themselves through sound, or inspire every creator to express themselves through sound, that is part of the fundamental strategic partnership. And I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't thinking about those types of producers as well as the really hardcore existing producer or music creator.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, there's not very many kids out there who wouldn't want to produce music or make music, but having like getting the knowledge and getting access to even put your hands on your first MIDI controller and understanding like what do you do with it, is huge. So that's like a very win-win strategic partnership because you're simultaneously helping folks who want to make music just get their hands on their first tools. And then also, if they're successful, obviously they're going to be future customers and
Exactly.
users and ambassadors.
That's also the icing on the cake. I know it's not a charity, but I have to say it feels so good when you spend, because I came from these large organizations, and being able to do things within the community, within really amazingly technical people who've never been given a shot or maybe rarely get a shot. It feels good as a marketer. And I could say that's probably one of the first times that I've been able to feel that, in addition to working out the end to ends of a really great campaign and measuring the KPIs of how it performed. All of that is incredibly important. But what you make people feel as a brand marketer is especially important just as well.
I love this, talking about how it's directly impacting people, right in neighborhoods, right on the streets, right in buses, et cetera. We've got to take a quick break, but when we come back, I'm curious to talk about the worldwide footprint and what you've taken away from that. We'll be right back.
Music Tectonics, Swimming with Narwhals, Startup Pitch Competition applications are live now. Head over to musictectonics.com/conference to find the link to apply, eligibility requirements, and a timeline for the competition. Get your application in and purchase a badge by August 8th, 2025 to be eligible to participate.
Okay, we're back. Bomo, this has been so much fun. We're getting into the juicy stuff now. Music is so global now. What have you learned from Native Instruments' worldwide footprint that gets you excited about where music is going?
I've learned that creativity is borderless. We talked about this a little bit. I want to make sure that our music and music in general is accessible to everyone. And it's, that access shouldn't be something that people aren't able to leverage. The fact is, this is software. And, if you looked at the hardware side, we are also having a moment where we're making that more available to everyone, those surfaces available to everyone. But a producer who is in Lagos, I'm Nigerian, and I really think about that region. I think about all the moments that are happening within Afro beats and all the moments that are happening within kind of Latinx music. And they're all in need of help, support, right? I think that's something that I've learned from operating on this global stage, is that all of these little stories deserve to be told. Because when you start getting into that, yes, people respond to different price points, different training content. Maybe some people need to be pushed out of their comfort zone a little bit. It's really got me thinking about how we, as even in conversations with our product teams, how we not necessarily just focus on what we've always done, how we kind of look at rolling out lighter entry plans. So that's something that I've really learned, is that we need to make that accessibility wider. And we need to think about both the stories that we tell from a marketing standpoint, and we need to then obviously reflect them in the products, reflect them in the pricing, reflect them on where you're getting that information on how to get started or how to continue your journey as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you're thinking not in terms of brute promotion, but really about access, about education, about not just cultural relevance that we talked about around emergence of sound or creativity, but really just about relevance to different groups of communities based on where they are in terms of, not only in terms of their musical development, like we talked about with individuals and youth, but also in terms of a society, like an entire region of the world. It's interesting to hear you talk about some of these partnerships with these real culture moment creators, and then also like people who literally haven't put their hands on an instrument before or downloaded a plugin. One of the most challenging things in marketing music creation tools is that you have to speak to both the biggest hit makers as well as new artists and producers and even hobbyists. How do you manage making your marketing work relevant to both of those two user types?
Yeah. I want to make it clear for anyone who's listening that marketing isn't just what you see on screen. It's not just an ad. Marketing goes into how you show up, how the brand is showing up in all those areas where you might not expect or where you've been asking them to show up in the past. We do a lot of hands-on. I can talk about the artist board, for example, when I'm thinking about some of that kind of prosumer side of the business.
Did you say the artist board, like artist advisors, basically?
Yeah. So
Got
we
it.
have a list of, so we actually have a board where it is kind of essentially a committee of selected artists who share with us regularly what is at the core, at the crux of what a producer, an engineer, a musician who is at that level would want, right? So they'll preview upcoming features, they'll stress test usability, they'll surface emerging creator needs. They'll help us make sure that the toolkit that we've got is really sharp, it's culturally led. So you talk about cultural relevance. That's one of the ways that we do it, because they really help sanity check the work, the pipeline. I don't know what a label is asking for, and I couldn't tell you always on a technical level what we're missing, but those folks help us. And then on the other side of it, of the spectrum, I would say it's, like I said, doing the field work, talking to folks who are coming out of Guildhall or maybe the Royal College of Music in London, maybe Berkeley, making sure we really understand those dynamics. And that's part of marketing too, right? That field work, beyond just the ads that you see, it's making sure that you understand those anecdotes, those nuances, and then turn them into solutions that respond to what those groups have been asking for. And so again, my job is really making sure I'm listening. And then it's also making sure that we are responding with activity that helps.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's interesting to hear about the artist board and sort of like them being really specific about what they need versus like almost flips a little bit where you're educating new artists, new producers, and giving them tools to just get further along. I can see the relationship between those two different conversations. It's almost like two sides of the same coin. I really feel like I'm starting to get to know your approach and your kind of like your philosophy as a marketing person, which has been super fun. You have a really sweet and thoughtful and generous approach to how you do marketing, which is really great. I'm inspired by it. And I think our listeners are going to enjoy kind of like thinking through your approach to this. I'm curious, one thing we love to do on the Music Tectonics podcast is check in with people that are in different positions in the industry and in the world and ask, what other trends in music innovation are you keeping an eye on? What, maybe it's not things that you're implementing today at Native Instruments, but just as you're doing that, listening as people are coming out of the bathroom at the club or you're in a school, something, doing an educational piece. What are you hearing about that you're like, oh yeah, we got to keep an eye on this one?
Yeah, I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression that I'm just waiting outside.
Sorry, I didn't mean it like that.
Yeah, no, but I've seen a lot of interesting stuff. As you know, we did a lot of social listening. I also speak to a lot of researchers about shifts in culture, shifts in music, shifts in production styles. I think on a personal level, one thing that I'm really interested in, I'm seeing it a lot, is this kind of Gen Z nostalgia. I think it's really fascinating. And I don't know, maybe I'm just getting older, but I'm still trying to understand it. I'm still trying to understand the origins of it. I know that everything old becomes new again. I know that those philosophies, but I'm like, where is all of this coming from? I sat in a meeting the other day and a conversation, it was with a bunch of other marketers, and we were all talking about these innovation trends. And one of those innovations is marketing in an analog way. So bringing paper back and giving people that tactile feeling of information again, because we've become so digitally led, and almost going on that digital detox, if you will, by providing information in a really unexpected way, which is analog, so that it feels disruptive. And so I love that. I think that, the combination of artists celebrating nostalgia, leaning into vinyl, they're doing their own thing and flipping it. And it's a similar thing with marketing. Is we're a very digitally led company. We're a tech company and we're a music company. And sometimes we don't lead with music. We don't lead with feeling, with tactile stuff. And so I love this trend where it's almost flipping innovation on its head, where innovation doesn't necessarily have to be digitally first. It can be stripping everything back and going to, quote unquote, the basics,
yeah.
to cut your message through and really have some staying power. I'm going to ask you a question. if that's okay.
Yeah, we'll try.
When what was the last birthday card you threw away?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you kind of hang on to them, right? You got a
hold on
Tupperware
to
full
'em.
of them.
You hold on to them, even if it's like, okay, this was 16 years ago. It feels weird to throw away a birthday card that's just written with so much love and sentiment. And I think there's something about that I'm really investigating right now is there's a special nature to these things, and it doesn't matter that it's paper. That doesn't cheapen it. It's how it makes you feel, what's on it, that nostalgia plus tactile plus a celebration of flipping it and doing it in your own way is an innovation that's on my radar right now.
I'm seeing Native Instruments scratch-off cards in your future, Bomo, or possibly like every handwritten coupon that you're going to have to sign yourself. Your hand's going to, next time we talk, you're going to be like, oh, I've got carpal tunnel from signing so many cards, guys.
Scratch and sniff plugins.
Oh, now we're talking. Yes. We are waiting for the scratch and sniff printer that prints smells with music.
I think the question is, where does it all go?
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you see all this innovation, doesn't mean that it's a signal of a huge seismic change. Now, AI for sure is a different kettle of fish, but for some of these smaller ones, I think we look at these as breadcrumbs within the business to help us determine if we're on the right track, if some of these leading indicators are telling us that the things that we're already investing in based on the conversations that we've had are legit, and if they'll be well received by the community that we're serving. Marketing takes a while to put out marketing programs. So if I was just looking at those trends in the silo, I think we'd have a pretty terrible business.
Yeah, it has to do with whether people actually want it and whether they're going to use it, whether it goes into their workflow, et cetera. So, well, Bomo, this has been a blast. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and talk to you, and both hearing about Native Instruments and sort of like your philosophy, your perspective on marketing in the music creativity space. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. We have new episodes for you every week. Did you know we do free monthly online events that you, our lovely podcast listeners, can join? Find out more at musictectonics.com. And while you're there, look for the latest about our annual conference and sign up for our newsletter to get updates. Everything we do explores the seismic shifts that shake up music and technology, the way the Earth's tectonic plates cause quakes and make mountains. Connect with Music Tectonics on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. That's my favorite platform. Connect with me, Dimitri Vitsa, if you can spell it. We'll be back again next week, if not sooner.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.